completed a research year working in the program in global surgery and social change at Harvard Medical School, and is currently a postdoc research fellow at the Department of Surgery, Brigham and Women's Hospital. She is also an advisor to the Global Surgery Foundation. Thank you, Dr. Anam. We're also pleased to have Dr. Russell Seth Martins. Dr. Martins graduated from the AKU class of 2021 and is currently working as a postdoc research fellow in thoracic surgery at Hackensack Meridian Health in New Jersey. Dr. Martins' research focus is in cardiothoracic surgery, with additional interests in education, public health, and sustainability. He is a passionate mentor and is always excited to work with the upcoming generations of surgical researchers in Pakistan. Thank you very much, all the guests, for taking out the time for us. We're going to have 3 talks on different aspects of postdocs, and then we'll conclude this event with a 10-minute question and answer session. The audience is encouraged to ask relevant questions using the chat box, and the speakers are more than welcome to answer them. I will now invite Dr. Anam to please share her insights about strategies for securing a postdoctoral position in the United States. Dr. Anam.
Thank you so much, Talal, and thank you to the Surgery Interest Group for organizing this. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hi, Rida. And Russell, I think, is going to be joining us soon. Just before starting, can you guys put in the chat what year, or if you're an alumni or if you're final year, and then I can make sure that I'm sort of talking in accordance. Just put it in the chat and I'll get started. So like Talal mentioned, I'll be talking about strategies for securing postdoctoral positions in the US. And I know Rida and Russell are going to be touching upon some aspects and elaborating upon some aspects. So maybe that's why I'm a bit superficial. But the way I plan to talk about this is essentially to first talk about why you would want to do a postdoctoral research position in surgery, especially what the routes are that you can actually look for these positions, what you need as an individual applicant, and we know that generally for IMGs, having greater research experience in terms of publication or just general experience will increase your chances of matching. Even in research in surgical education, it has been shown quite clearly that it's statistically significant to have had research publications to increase your chances of matching by almost 1.5 times what it would be without. So that's mainly why people do want to do research in general. But for us in particular, I think in research in the US is specifically important because of connections in the system. And people can do research from anywhere. We think at AKU do incredible research and we're at par with anyone in the globe, but the connections in the system which help you match is a huge reason why we seek US postdocs. And so that's, I think, the groundwork that we all kind of are going into this with. And so just before you start the journey of looking for a postdoc and opting for a postdoc and doing a postdoc, I do think that it's important to consider these few things. Firstly, what kind of position that you want? Is it a basic science one? Is it a clinical one? Are you just doing a postdoc as a stepping stone to match, or is it to match at an academic program? Is it as a learning experience? Is it because you have a specific career interest in that? Do you even like research? And I know we often have the mentality of beggars can't be choosers and whatever we get. Sure, but it's still a year or 2 years of your life at minimum. And I think it's important to have all these considerations going in. Does money matter to you, whether it's paid or unpaid? Is that something that's important to you? Maybe you're an only child like I am, and it's not that big a deal. Maybe you're someone who has a pressure to earn as soon as you graduate. So whatever that is, you have to take into consideration all of these things and maybe start your search with your own preferences in mind, because you're likely to be more productive and have a better time if you know what you want and get what you want. I know it's ideal case scenario and that doesn't always happen, but if in case it does, that would really help. And so being really clear about those things is, I think, something imperative while you're going into starting the process. So with that background, now I really want to talk about the routes and the strategies, which is the crux of this talk, in terms of how you can actually achieve securing a postdoc. And in my mind, I've divided it into 5 sort of broad categories. One is when we go for electives. in 5th year, and that is where we actually are. A lot of us go to the US and are working with programs there, and that is a chance to secure electives. Then you can have sort of programs that are annually recruiting people, right? So these are people who these are programs that take up postdocs every single year, and you apply like you would apply to a degree program or to a job. And then you have academic programs usually that are hiring, and you can look at programs themselves. You can find them through Google, LinkedIn, Twitter. I'll go into details of all of these in the next few slides. Places where there are former IMGs or otherwise just places where there's research happening, and it might be about the spot might be vacant soon because they've applied for the match maybe, and they'll be matching next year or something like that. And then cold emails, which is just when you email people asking for a position. So I think these are the 5 broad sort of categories that I would think about when approaching looking for a postdoc. So for electives, it's honestly very, very, very simple. Your predominant sort of focus during your electives is really making a great impression. And if that is not going to be research-based, that's going to be your clinical impression that you make, and the hard work that you do, and people knowing that this is someone they can rely on, someone who shows up, someone who works really hard, someone who is competent. And I've known people who have managed to secure electives with very minimal research experience at AKU, and even not having done research on their electives, but simply being just a great person to have on the team, and really that showcases to the residents, to the faculty, that this is someone that we could hire in a research position, and they would work hard because they worked hard when we had them as an elective student. So I think that is the main thing that you just have to do, which is something that I'm hoping all of you will do anyway. The other thing during electives that you can do, which can help from the research aspect and maybe shifting towards a postdoc position, is talking to the residents or the faculty, saying, oh, if you guys have a case report, or if you see an interesting case, like take the initiative and say that, maybe we could write about this, or talk to them about, working on some research and saying, oh, I have some free time this weekend. I would love to, write up something if you have anything happening. And so what that does is that really also showcases your research skills to them and helps you sort of make that connection on a research standpoint. And during your electives, if they've gone well and you are almost kind of, that a postdoc is a big possibility for you, I would talk to the faculty that you're working with, or main academic faculty in that program, and do your research before, know what they work on, know how you could maybe contribute to that, know what your skill set is, and maybe talk to them before your electives end and say, is there a possibility for a postdoctoral position or a postdoctoral research here that I could do with you? And because if there is one, maybe then you guys can figure out funding, you guys can apply for a grant. If they don't have funding, maybe they do have funding and they're looking for someone. So that, I think electives are a key time where you're there in person, where you can showcase your ability and you can sort of have an inroads towards research. So that's number 1. Number 2 is programs with annual recruitment, right? So this is the program in Global Surgery and Social Change that I did last year, is a program that hires people every year. It isn't open right now, but for 2024, for example, their dates will be released, and usually applications are June, July of the prior year, and they finalize the applicants by December. Similarly, Mass General Hospital Department of Trauma has an international research fellowship designed purely for IMGs, and you apply to that, and it also is a running application, which I think is again September, October each year. These are 2 that I could think of off the top of my head, but I know there are 1 or 2 others at least, if not more, that do this, right? And so this is sort of a level playing field for you to apply with anyone else and have a good chance of securing a position in one of these places. So things like that are something that definitely you should keep an eye out for, and the sooner the better, because these applications close a year before or 6 months before, right? So you should start thinking about that a year in advance and look for opportunities like these. And this just requires just your normal application things that you need, letters and CVs and your personal statement, et cetera, and their application form for each program. So this is just something that you should be mindful of and maybe look into well in advance. Then we have what you can do, right? So do your homework. And I say that in the nicest way possible, because people ask, what do I do? And, we Google for everything. And this is something you can definitely Google. I know I Googled all kinds of variations of surgery postdocs, postdoctoral research positions, research assistants, and we call them postdoctoral research positions. And that's the ideal case scenario, but research assistants, research scientists, data scientists, these are other words that you can use in the clinical realm to kind of look for research positions. And for LinkedIn, especially, there's this portion in LinkedIn, which looks at jobs, where you can put in exactly what you're looking for, general surgery in the United States. And that comes up with, a a bunch of results. And then what you can do specifically is look into university programs like Stanford, Yale, University of Alabama, Harvard. All these places have dedicated postdoctoral pages. And I know Stanford lists everything by department. They have CTS separately, Gen Cert separately, Ped Cert separately, urology separately. Similarly, other universities have this too. Not all the sites are as user-friendly, but they do have their open positions. And even if, for example, you're seeing that it's not open to an IMG or you can't apply through this channel, what it'll tell you is someone is looking for a position, and you can Google that faculty and find their email and maybe reach out to that faculty where you know that they're looking for a position. These two are great avenues. Twitter is another avenue where you can write postdoctoral fellowship. A lot of the IMG pages post about research fellowships around the time of match, especially in the SOAP period, but generally also that's another avenue. So I would really go out of my way and scour all of these sites, scour Google, and really try to find open positions and reach out to those people, even if you can't through the formal channel, but politely through an email. And that often creates opportunities for you that wouldn't be there otherwise. Then you have vacancies in labs with former postdocs, right? And this is basically keep your eyes and ears open and communicate with those people, especially for AKU graduates, because it makes life easier because, you can just reach out to alumni, etc. But I know there have been quite a few labs where previous graduates have helped the next person come in and they were also from AKU. And so, for example, if you know that someone has matched this year in surgery and they were working in a research position, like me, for example, now that I'm giving you this talk, you know that I've done this, you can be like, oh, Anam, if you are applying this year and your position is going to be free next year, do you think that I could maybe apply for your position? Or is there a way to apply for it? Or can you maybe talk to your faculty and you don't need to open applications or before you open applications, we can figure things out. And that is always one thing that you really need to keep eyes and ears open for. And I know Haki, sir, it has a lot of alumni records. We've started making the research postdoc lists as well alongside match lists. So I would really look for people and reach out politely once again, and sort of see what their trajectory is and if their labs have vacancies, because you would know that they have IMGs that they've hired previously. So hopefully visa should not be an issue. You would then also know that AQ has a good rep over there, and so you would be in better standing than other applicants, right? So that would be one thing that is, again, no guarantees, because a lot of times the people working there already are limited in the amount they can help you, but it is a great starting point, at least. And then finally is the cold emails portion of this, right? So this is tedious. I've known people, I was fortunate enough that after a few applications, I got into PGSSC, but it is not an easy process, and you're not always lucky about it. I've known people who have written up to 200 emails that ended up getting a postdoc after that, right? And so this is something that you really need to kind of be persistent about, polite about, and really patient about. And it's not easy, right? And the way you can figure out who to email essentially is that you can look at people who are academic faculty at universities that you're interested in, or who are doing research that you're interested in, or and how you find their emails. If you can't find them online, look for their publications in PubMed, look for where their corresponding authors, find their email, write a polite email, and I have a slide on how you can really write those emails. But look at the people that you can kind of reach out to. Don't be really smart about this in terms of, like, if they're two faculty in one university and you bombard both those faculties with like multiple emails and have the exact same thing on both emails, and they communicate it, or somehow you send it to everyone in that program, it looks a bit weird, and it might not leave the best impression of you. But if you have a really polite email, it's sent to someone who's relevant, who you've tailored the email to them, there's no harm in that. And you can do that for hundreds of people, honestly. And that might be you just need one person to respond. A lot of times people don't respond, but even if one does, that could be the chance that you have. And so that's the final sort of last ditch effort, which has yielded success for many people, that you can sort of go for. And so based on that, what do you need to do all of this, right? So one thing that I alluded to earlier, that you should start working on this early, maximum May, June of the year before you intend to start, because most places start June, but not necessarily, right? Research does not follow the academic calendar. It could be starting in January, it could be starting in September of that year. So I would say at least like if you're graduating this year, I would start looking now. Even 2 months before would have been fine. Even now is fine, right? As soon as you can start thinking about it, looking at places, especially places that need applications that are yearly programs, but also places that have openings, you can really start to make a plan for yourself, and you're much more likely to secure something that way. So what you need for sure is references and LORs. Most places require 2, but 3 would be safe. Even if you don't have 3 research LORs, if you can have 1 or 2 people you worked with during research, but have like a third person who knows you clinically really well and can look at your CV and be like, oh yes, Anam is also involved in lots of research. They don't need to know your research work, but they can be a reference still. So if you have these on hand and you've already talked to them, maybe already drafted the LORs and gotten them approved, and you can just change the name per the place, that is something you having on hand is super helpful. Having a very well curated CV, and in your CV, your research experiences need to be highlighted above like things like your clinical experience or other things, right? Because this is specifically for a research job. So if you have publications and abstract presentations, etc., I would shift them above other things. So that's key also, and have that ready on hand. Someone could reply to you and say that, great, could you please send me, your CV and a letter of interest, for example. And so if you have that and you send that straight away, that leaves a really great impression of you. A cover letter. So a cover letter is not a personal statement. It's more about, okay, these are my skills and this is what I can bring. And this is why I'm specifically interested in your work. It's a lot more scientific. It's not wishy-washy. It's not like, this is why I love medicine. This is why I love neurosurgery. This is why I love global surgery. It's very much like, these are my skills. This is my interest. And this is one sentence saying why you're interested. And then this is what I can bring specifically for you. And again, you'll have to curate it to every job you apply to, but having a template of that makes that process much quicker. The personal statement, most places don't require it. Some places do, would be something that you really are talking about your passion for something and your passion for that research. And that can involve stories and all those other things that we know commonly. But a lot of places usually don't ask for that. But it's, again, something, if you have it on hand, you have the time to draft it, is good to have. Then the final couple of slides, what will help your chances of securing a position, right? Firstly, having previous research and manuscript writing experience is great. Ideally, first author publications is great. I did not have, I think I had experiences. I did not have many publications. I think I had 2 or maybe 1 at the time of application, even though stuff was submitted. I know people who had none who managed to secure those. But even if you can say that you've had experience and you can really showcase it, for example, even data collection, you can say, I understand how to organize data, how to, administratively manage large data for research, to communicate between different groups, be a liaison, and also write it up. Those are skills that you can sell, and you should really have some research experience ideally to boost your application. If you have the ability to perform analysis, I know that's really hard, but working, because I recruit for our lab also, but if someone says, I can run my own analysis, I can work with Stata or SAS or R, SPSS people do know in the US, but it's not as common. The others are more common. Then that is an automatic boost and something that I would be like, oh yeah, wow, this person can really, add value and publish quickly. Make sure you tailor your applications. Do not be very generic. Obviously, you can't write everything a bajillion times, but specifically tailor things to what that lab is doing in an interview or in an application, and really showcase your interest and how your work aligns with their work. That always looks very good. And then finally, obviously, if you know someone who's worked with them, and having them recommend you or push you is always great. For the programs, having given the steps may or may not be that important, but it is for you. I feel like it will really help you really focus on the research if you get it. In some programs, it helps to say that, I'm done with all my steps. I want to dedicate 1 year or 2 years to just doing research. And so that helps. One thing I would like to highlight that we often forget here is that we in ATU have in the first 2 years, we do all the lab stuff, right? We do gel electrophoresis. We do all of those labs that, we were all sleeping in. We do all the basic science skills. And even if you're not fully confident with them, you can definitely list them as basic skills that you are familiar with in your applications, right? And also in 4th year, the CHS module, we are familiar with data analysis. We are familiar with epi data collection, starting in delivering and writing. And so don't undermine that. That is something that you can put on your CV and talk about. I know I'm going a little over time. I'm so sorry. I'm wrapping up in one slide. And also be proud of your Pakistani experiences, right? So even if, for example, someone's doing cutting edge cancer research and you want to tell them about why you're interested in that, you can say that, this is something that I would not have the chance to be exposed to in Pakistan, or maybe this is something that's prevalent in Pakistan. I would love to bring that back, or love to, learn these skills and bring it here. I feel like we often, shy away from those things. And I've seen it work really well, to be honest and upfront, and really tie that into your interest with research when you're applying. This final thing that I kind of want to just touch upon, this is like a whole separate talk that people should give, honestly, but your emails, these are, especially in surgery, people don't read emails. A lot of people just do not go beyond the first sentence even. So make them short, but they have to convey the important information. No one would really care if you've, when you gave your step, what you got on all 3 steps. Like I would be really, really to the point. Hello, doctor, last name of the doctor. My name is X. I am from X. My interest in, I would love to work on your lab. I have 5 publications, multiple research experiences. I'm interested in X because of X. And then have a very specific ask. Don't just say, I would love to connect, or be really specific. If you have 5 minutes to talk on Zoom, I would love to have a meeting, or something like that, right? So that they are responding. Otherwise, no one really responds. And feel free to follow up. If no one's responded, a lot of times people get a lot of messages in their inbox. Feel free to follow up in a couple of weeks with them if they haven't responded. But again, be polite. You don't know where you're going to see these people again. Don't be a red flag. If you're polite, even if they don't respond, that's fine. But you can at least know that you haven't left a bad impression on anyone. Say your thank yous. If someone replies and says, no, I'm sorry, I can't help, reply and say, thank you so much. If something becomes available, please do let me know, or something like that. The final thing is, there's mixed opinions on if you should attach your CV off the bat or not, because some programs filter out emails with attachments. So I'm not sure on that myself personally, but if you feel really strongly about some place and want to attach your CV, you can do that upfront. Otherwise, you can leave a sentence saying, I would love to send my CV and a letter of interest or something like that. Finally, is it the end of the world if you don't secure a US research position when you've graduated? It really isn't. I know it feels like it, but there are so many ways to get to this end point. I know people who have matched fresh and matched really well with very minimal research experience or no research experience, people who have done their research in Pakistan and really talked about it and talked about their public health interest or Pakistan specific interest and how their research helped them and matched as well. People who have done this and built brilliant connections in the US and matched as well. So it is not the end of the world. I just wanted to put that out there because sometimes it feels like if something isn't happening for you, it's the end of the world. It really isn't. But if you have any more questions, again, in the chat and otherwise afterwards, please feel free to ask me. I would love to help anyone I can. Thank you so much for having me, and hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Anam. That was really, really insightful. And participants can send in their questions in the chat, but we'll be taking all of them in the question and answer portion towards the end. I'll now hand it over to Dr. Rida, and she'll share her experiences and talk about an analysis of various types of postdoc positions and their advantages and disadvantages. Dr. Rida.
Thank you, Talal, and thank you to Surgery Interest Group for having me. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, sounds good. All right. My name's Rida. I'm a graduate of the class of 2019. A little bit about my journey. I was a little different from most people's. I graduated in November of 2019, and then COVID hit around January. I was looking for postdoc positions, but nothing was available to internationals. So AKU launched their DCRF, their first DCRF program. So I became a research fellow in the Department of Neurosurgery over there. I did 15 months with Dr. Shahzad Shamim and Dr. Athar Inam. And following that, I was at that point still looking for postdocs, but like Anam said, it is very difficult to find postdoc positions in the US, especially if you're looking for paid positions, which I believe that most of us are looking for. So I did my 1 year of house job at AKU just so that there's no gap in my CV. I believe that that's something that everyone should look out for, that there's no gap in their CVs. Even if you graduate in like 2018, 2019, 2020, it is very important to show for every year that there's an accountability of what you did, as opposed to just applying for the match like 3 years down the line and not having to show anything during that that period. That is something that's very important on your CVs. So I did 1 year of my house job, which covered the clinical, that I did have clinical experience. And I was fortunate enough to get in touch with Dr. Nitin Agarwal, who is my mentor at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, where I'm postdoc fellow currently. So I joined him when he was at WashU, Washington University in St. Louis, earlier this year in January, and then he moved to Pittsburgh. So we moved our lab with him. So that's how I've ended up at Pittsburgh currently. I'll be speaking about the different types of postdocs that we have ongoing. I will touch upon briefly to some of the things that Anam has already discussed, but let's see how this goes. And if anyone has any questions, please just put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to answer them. So the first biggest question is academic versus private postdoc positions. What you have to look for. So I don't know how much you know understand about an academic versus a private program, but when we're looking for residency spots, all of us want to match into a top tier program. And a top tier program from where we stand is like Massachusetts General, Henry Ford, University of Pittsburgh, UPenn, like all of these are the top programs. The thing about these top programs is these are all academic programs. Okay. So ideally, when you're looking for a postdoc position, I would always recommend everyone to look for an academic position as opposed to a private position, simply because of these 4 factors: networking opportunities. In the US, there is quite a debate between academic versus private practice in general. People who have been over here and who have interacted with the doctors in both sectors would know that there is quite a debate about which practice is better in terms of patient care and all of that. Academic practitioners, to some extent, do not like it's not the idea. Like if they get an LOR from a private practitioner recommending someone, they may not always be up to, like, they may not always want them to like be a part of their residency program, right? It varies obviously, but it is always better to look for an academic program, just because the strength of the LOR that you're going to get at the end of the day, because that LOR and that call that your PI will make for you when you're applying for residency is the most important thing, right? So if, for example, you're working with like a program director at UPenn, and he makes a call for you, that looks better than you working for a private practitioner, even if they're like one of the most renowned neurosurgeons or general surgeons in the world. Okay, it is important to look at these factors. That being said, it is also important to realize that postdoc opportunities in the US, especially for some of the more competitive subspecialties, is difficult to get. So if you do find a position at a private practice, I would tell you to go for it 100%. But during that time, it is important to network and to be able to find a position at an academic center. How you could do that networking is attending conferences. So every year, for every subspecialty, there are multiple conferences. Like I can tell you for neurosurgery, there's at least 10 per year. It is important to attend those conferences. Even if you're not presenting a paper, even if you have like an e-poster, for example, just show up to these conferences, speak to people, meet people. Those are your networking opportunities if you end up in a private practice. Those are the same networking opportunities you need to realize, even if you are in an academic practice. It is important to attend these conferences, to be able to show yourself, to show up and be like, hi, my name is Dr. Rida Mitta. I'm a graduate from Pakistan. I'm currently working at the Agarwal lab at University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. I would love to talk to you about your interest. Obviously, always, whenever you're speaking to these people, these are very, very well-known people, right? You need to have your background on them. Do not just show up to a top-notch person and just start speaking that, oh, I'm interested in your research, because the next question would be like, oh, what research are you interested in? Do not start like throwing arrows without any background. That is essential, because once you leave a bad impression in any one of these people, you will be blacklisted. These people talk. It's a very small network, especially for the more competitive subspecialties. It is very like they all know each other. They all talk about each other. I can tell you for neurosurgery, if you mess up with one of them, everyone will know. Right? It is important to look at these aspects. The caliber of papers, honestly, I don't think there's much of a difference between the caliber of papers between academic and private practices. What will be the difference is your sample size. So private practices may not have as large of a sample size as an academic practice. So where you publish would vary. That being said, I do know of people who are working in private practices as postdocs, and they're publishing pretty decently, like in some of the top-notch journals. But that is something that you need to be mindful of. Strength of LORs, like I've already discussed, it is important that the LOR that you're getting, A, it's very, very good, but B, it is from a person who is well known, who can make those calls for you and have the other person across the line be like, oh yeah, I know this person. So if they're working with him or her, they might be a good applicant and that they would consider you for an interview. What you have to realize is step scores, everything, very, very important. But once you get into that interview for any residency position, it's a blank slate. It is just about the interview. Right? I mean, everything else, yes, counts for sure. I'm not denying that. But everything leading up to that point is to get you into that interview room. How you do in that interview room, it's completely up to you, right? But you need to get yourself over there. And the primary purpose for anyone doing a postdoc, apart from those who want to pursue a research career, for those of us who, and I want to pursue a clinical career in neurosurgery, for those of us who want to pursue a clinical career in any subspecialty, it is to be able to find a residency spot at a good place, right? And the only way you can do that is if you make it to that interview room, right? And you need to be able to have the right mentor at any facility to be able to make those calls for you. And that can vary between academic and private. Personal preferences, which should always be to academic practices, but that's just that varies. I mean, when I was looking at places, I was looking at academic practices specifically, just because I knew that there was a discrepancy with how an LOR from a private practice would be viewed compared to an LOR from an academic practice. Pay scale. So when it comes to pay, okay, actually, I'll discuss this in my next slide because that is the next most important thing. So this is one thing you need to keep in mind, academic versus private, and the other is paid versus unpaid. Like Anam already mentioned, most of these places will start you as an unpaid initially. So how this works is you apply to a bunch of places, they'll be like, oh, okay, we'll be happy to have you, but we can't pay you. It is very important for you to be very clear with them about your financial circumstances, that yes, if you are able to have an unpaid position, great, tell them. But don't just say, yeah, okay, I can do an unpaid. Give them a time limit, because you don't want to be working for someone unpaid for like 2 years, right? Because that's not fair. It is very expensive to live in the US, no matter which city you end up living in. Like, I mean, I was in St. Louis and now I'm in Pittsburgh, and it is expensive without the pay to be able to survive in these places. So it is, and I can understand that people can afford it, but you also need to, and have an honest discussion with your parents, because obviously they will be the ones supporting you, about how much they can pay. And once you have that, ideally, this is something you should do before you start reaching out to people, because you should know where you stand before you talk to other people asking for a paid or unpaid position. So generally how it works is people would be like, yes, we would love to have you on board, but it'll be an unpaid position. You can start off by saying, yes, okay, I can work for you unpaid for like 6 months or a year, whatever, depending on your circumstances are. In my situation, when I was offered the position, I was very straight up that I need to be paid. So my PI was very kind, and he said that, how can you set up on your own? And we had an honest discussion about it. These people over here, they prefer that you are honest with them about it, as opposed to being like, yeah, okay, I can work for you unpaid for like an unlimited amount of time, and then showing up 6 months later and being like, sorry, can you please start paying me? Doesn't look good on your part. You need to have all of these conversations, and I know that these are difficult conversations to have in the beginning, but you have to be so the culture in the US is not what we've seen in Pakistan. There is a hierarchy for sure, but when you're applying for a job, you're applying for a job. You're looking at everything. You need to understand that, I can understand that we all think that beggars can't be choosers and all of that, but when you're applying for a job and once someone's called you and you're talking to them, you're not a beggar at that point. You're on that interview call because they've seen something in you. So you can be very, very honest about your financial circumstances, all right? And so when it worked, well, how it worked out for me was, I was initially supposed to be unpaid, and I was very clear that I could not be unpaid for longer than 3 months. So my PI gave me a bunch of gave me a criteria that I had to fulfill, and as soon as I clear out that criteria, I'll be able to get paid. And I was able to do that within the month, so I started getting paid. I know about certain hospitals like Mayo and all of these places where you have to do 6 months of unpaid research before they get you on the payroll. Some some of these hospitals just have that criteria, like point blank, that you have to do 6 months or a year unpaid before they can transition you. Obviously, once you're over there, if you leave a good impression, you can have that conversation with your PIs. But that is something that you need to figure out before you start applying. The availability of paid opportunities. So how the pay works over here for any postdoc research fellow is from the funding that PI gets. From the grants that you apply for, whatever money. So for every grant, there is a subsection for the research fellow to be paid out of. So what you can do is, especially if you want to make your opportunity paid, even if it is unpaid, once you're working in a lab, you can start applying for these grants. Okay, once you start applying for these grants, there's always a subsection which has the research fellow. Once you get this money for your PI, for your hospital, they will, and have this conversation with them, that they will end up paying you whatever is the amount that's given in that grant. So that is one way to get yourself funded. The other way would be just to have very honest conversations, to be honest. Like, it is very, very important that you understand that being unpaid over here for a long duration of time is not feasible. It's not something that anyone can do. It's not something that I would recommend people doing. And just in general about how to apply for these positions, I know that Anam covered the majority of it, but some things that I have learned, because I do a lot of these interviews for my lab and we take on more people as time goes on. The PI that you're going to be emailing, they will not read your email. To be 100% honest, they're way too busy, these surgeons, to be able to read your email. If they find that the email is well written to a certain extent, just by skimming it, they'll probably transfer it to their research fellows, to their PAs, and have them be like, I get regular emails without looking to this person, without looking to that person. And then we go through the entire process of reading their emails, getting in touch with them, speaking to them, seeing all of that. Personally, what I look for when I'm looking at these is and this is what I did when I was applying. I sent out my CVs immediately with my email, because for neurosurgery specifically, they look for how much experience they already have in terms of research, because they don't have the time to sit and teach you how to do research. I was fortunate in that sense that I had done a year of research with Dr. Shehzad and Dr. Athar at AKU, and I already had about 10 publications. So it looked good on my CV that when I was applying, that she already has a position, she already has some research experience. Just things. So when they send it to a research fellow, their research fellow or whoever it is will probably reach out to you and be like, hey, I know that you contacted Dr. Agarwal. I was wondering if we could chat. What you need to understand, that person is not someone at your level. They're higher than you. They're already a research fellow over there. So even if they're being very casual with you about it, that, just call me by my first name or whatever, don't do it. Don't do it. Just call them by Dr. whatever, Dr. what, because those are traps that you don't want to fall for. You need to be very, very professional, no matter what you're doing and who you're talking to. Always attach your CV, personal preference, but obviously that can vary. Be very, very kind to everyone you speak to, because these people, they all talk. And I know that there was a question in the chat box about if you should reach out to maybe a PhD or an MD. I would reach out to an MD, especially if you're looking, so that again varies. If you want a clinical, if you're looking for your career-wise in a clinical direction, reach out to an MD. If you're looking for a more research-oriented position, reach out to a PhD. It always just varies about where you want to end up. Because yes, an LOR from a PhD will always look good, but what any hospital, when taking in a residency applicant and looking at a residency applicant, they'd be like, will they be able to work in our system? Because they work with a PhD. So PhDs, they're very, very particular about their research, right? So are MDs, of course, but that's a different field altogether. So if you show up with 50 publications and you're working with a PhD and you have no clinical experience when you're applying for the residency match, it does not look good, right? So you need to make sure what your preferences are, where you want to head up with your life. If you want a clinical career, then you need to apply to an MD position. At the end of it, why does it stop working? But just remember that it's a marathon. It is not a sprint. Like Anam already mentioned, there are people who send out 200, 300 emails before they get a position. I was fortunate enough to send out 3 emails and get it on my 3rd one. But it takes time. It takes forever to be able to find a postdoc position, specifically something that matches your needs. Always put your needs above the other person's. You're not just begging for a position. You're looking at it in your career wise. And I know it's easier for us to say because we've already reached this position, but had we been able, okay, so I was offered a position in a basic science lab before I was offered this position, and I knew that I could not do basic sciences. Like it didn't align with my with what my long-term goals was. So I gave up on that position just because this was not something I'd be interested in, and I knew that at the end of the day, it would not help me too much. So you get that mindset out of your head that you guys are beggars. You're not. You come from the Al Khan University Hospital, which is a very well-renowned hospital across the world. People know when you go, oh yeah, I'm from AKU. It opens up opportunities. So you're not a beggar. Get that mindset out of your head. You're looking for opportunities that are well suited to your needs. Always put your needs before anyone else's. No matter what your PI says, no matter what the person you're reaching out to you says, I'll be able to help you with whatever. Put your needs, see if this works out towards your end goal. And I know that it takes forever. Like, I mean, I graduated 2019 and I started my postdoc in 2023. So that's like about 3 years, a little longer than that. So it takes a while, but do not in any way be discouraged by that. Always reach out to people. I personally found that it's helpful if you reach out to people who are already doing postdocs in the US, especially in the field that you require. Like Anam said, we're all very helpful. At any point, if you want any position, you should reach out to them. Even if there's nothing in our labs, we'd obviously be able to help you find someone who would be able to help. Another thing that I would like to emphasize is when you're looking for a postdoc position, the ideal time to start would be in March. So what happens is when the match list comes out and people start matching, that's the time when people go like, okay, bye, I'm out. They leave their postdoc positions to, take a few months off or whatever before they join their strenuous residency programs. That is the ideal time to start reaching out, because what happens is that when any research fellow, any postdoc is leaving their lab, their PI will always be like, well, find me a replacement. And it is their responsibility to find you a replacement. It is great to reach out to AKU alumni at that point in time, asking them, will they be recommending you? That might actually save you from a lot of hassle of writing all of these emails, and you could actually just be speaking to them and talking to their PI directly. I think that would be great if people could start looking out in March. Any questions that people may have? I could answer them, or we could do it at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rida. We'll now take questions from the audience. So someone asked in our registration form that, can you shed some light on applying for EB1 and EB2 visas during postdoc research years? What should the timeline be?
Sure. So I would be very happy taking that question because it was something that I was exploring myself as well. And I was going to squeeze that on, but as you can see, my wheel is already too full. But that was going to be one of my boxes. So if you're staying at your postdoc for more than a year, year and a half, 2 years, which is not a long time, there is also the opportunity to look into getting a green card before you start your residency. All right. The pathway to that is that you apply for something called, so this is going to be new terminology to a lot, if not everyone. It was new to me the first time I heard it as well. But it's called a national interest waiver, and it is a self-sponsored green card application, meaning your employer doesn't have to get behind you and sponsor you. It's highly unlikely that your employer is going to sponsor you as an institution to get you your green card. They generally only do that when you commit to staying with them for a good 5 years, or an indefinite contract, that sort of thing. That's when they can invest their time and money in you. But if not, there are also self-sponsored options to a green card. The one that is most applicable to us, which is just budding sort of research scientists, is the EB2, employment-based green card 2, and USME, and in that the national interest waiver. So what national interest waiver means is that in the sake of national interest, the government sort of waives the requirement of your employer sponsoring you, and you can self-sponsor. So timelines again. So let me just disclose this. I didn't have this on my disclosure, but this does not constitute legal advice. But the timelines are they're very volatile at the moment. Up till November of last year, it was a done deal. You could apply today, and then the process would have started, and within 6 months, you could have been sort of on the path to a green card. In November, that changed, and there came sort of a backlog because a lot of Pakistanis and internationals have been applying for green cards, and there's a backlog. The backlog sort of persisted until March of this year, March 2023. Then it worsened in April this month, and then today morning or last night they released another announcement saying that it's worsened even more. So the thing that you should do is, once you do get yourself into a postdoc, or even before that, um, look get a free evaluation from a law firm. There's a lot of law firms that offer a free evaluation, and get their thoughts on the timelines that are expected, because like I said, they're very volatile, and changes in timelines will make you reconsider your entire plan. Generally it would take about maybe a year to year and a half to maximum 2 years. If the timelines are even more backlogged and the lawyers are telling you, okay, hey, it's probably not going to look possible to start in 2 years, or to get it done in 2 years, then I think it would probably make more sense to not think of a green card before residency, even though it has a lot of benefits, and just go ahead, do your residency on a J1 visa, which is what most people use for surgery, and then get your green card after you've done your residency, when you're doing a fellowship, whatever, the traditional route. Um, or if you really, really want the green card, then it's not probably going to take more than 2 to 3 years, and you could decide, hey, the green card means a lot to me, or the green card is going to add a lot to my application, which it does. It opens up a lot of avenues, and I'm happy to wait out the 2 and potentially 2+ years that will get me that green card. I think that was a fair overview of the thing. If anybody has specific questions, you can probably reach out to me later.
Also, we have a question. As a first year or second year MBBS student, how should I start doing research? Dr. Anam, would you like to take this?
So that's a pretty heavy question in terms of how you start doing research. But no, jokes aside, I think that it's very relevant, and it's really hard to figure out where to start. And I think one of the key things within AKU is looking at the faculty that do publish and publish well, right? And so we have a bunch of those faculties, both clinically and in basic sciences. And I would literally just go up to them and say that, I am relatively new to research. I would love to start. Is there a project that maybe I could help with to write or to collect data? Definitely, as a first or second year, do be prepared to have to do some of that data collection part and some of the more tedious research tasks, but those are just a step towards then looking at writing and so on and so forth, right? So I would literally just approach people. You can email them, you can set up a meeting with them, go speak to them directly, depending on your comfort level within AKU, and just start doing that. I would suggest doing that before just embarking on your own idea, or unless you have a great idea, in which case do go for it and take it to the faculty. But when you start off, it's always easier to have some kind of supervision in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And that really helps you build your skills quicker, as opposed to trying to figure it out, which ends up taking more time. If you are in your clinical years, keep your eye out for things like case reports, or if the residents usually have a bunch of papers that they are trying to get out, but because they're so clinically busy, they don't have time. So just literally be helpful. Be like, hey, do you have anything? I would love to write on it. I don't mind being like a third, fourth, fifth author, but I would love to write something. Or, oh, we saw this case that was super interesting. I've never seen it before. I've never read up on it. Maybe I did a quick PubMed search and saw that this was like published as a few case reports. Maybe we could do a case report. So take the initiative. Research is very much initiative driven. It's not a life or death situation where someone is, dying and you have to be there and you have to help. If you are someone who is going to pursue it, people are going to acknowledge that, and they're going to give you more work, and things are going to get done. If you're like, acha, kisi ne mujhe pucha nahi to khair hai, main nahi karti to khair hai, it's not going to get done. And you are also not going to no one's going to ask you to do it, and you're not going to get it done, and it's not going to get published. So please just have the initiative, approach people, and then approach residents, and then bring your own ideas forward, would be my 2 cents on that.
Okay, another question is the last one. Would you recommend pursuing a postdoc position if you have taken step 2 within medical school, or opt for a clinical experience, keeping in mind the importance of biology? Dr. Reda, would you like to take this?
Keeping in mind the importance of what?
Biology, I don't know.
Oh, YOG. Okay. So yeah, if you've taken your step 2, I would always, so it depends what you want to apply for, right? Like if you're looking for general surgery, for example, clinical internship would probably be a better fit. If you're looking for something that's in cardiothoracic, ophthalmology, neurosurgery, a postdoc position would probably help you more, because these subspecialties require a strong portfolio in terms of research. That being said, clinical experience is always important. I have a mix of both. That's just my personal preference. But when it comes to applying for and I'm assuming this is specifically for applying for the US, what your networking is the most important thing. And to find a clinical experience in the US after medical school, like apart from your electives that you do in medical school, but once you graduate, to find clinical experience in the US is very, very difficult. What you're going to find is an observership. An observership will not help you that much, because the person you're observing may or may not be able to relate with you and write an LOR that would actually be substantial. What would help is actually getting a postdoc or a research position, working with someone, developing that relationship, and then going for clinical experience. So that is how most of us pursuing neurosurgery are going about it. We're doing like 2 years of a postdoc, and then the year that we plan on applying for residency, we take a couple of months off to go for clinical externships. And those help, like clinical rotations. Those rotations help because then you're on the floor, you're helping out the residents. The residents get to see how good you are or how bad you are, depending on what your situation is. And then they can recommend you further on. So yeah, I would, in terms of building, because it's building networking. It's not about whether clinical is better or postdoc is better. It's just networking. Because for surgical specialties, you need someone to call and be like, yo, I know this person, she's good. You should definitely have her in your program. She's going to be an asset to you. And just by personal experience, no one's going to give you a clinical experience after you graduate without someone else calling them up and be like, can you please have this person with you for a month? So the safest way to go about it is to have a postdoc position, is to have a research position. And like Anam already mentioned, the research position may not always be a postdoc research fellow. It could be a research coordinator. It could be, there's like a bunch of things. Like, I mean, my official title initially was visiting researching scholar. Yeah. So yeah, just in terms of, I would say go for the research position first, develop good relationships, and then take it from there.
Thank you, Dr. Reda. With this, we come to an end. Thank you so much, Dr. Russell, Dr. Anam, and Dr. Reda, for taking out the time to speak to us. This was a very comprehensive discussion, and I'm sure the audience learned a lot. Thank you, participants, for tuning in today. Allah Hafiz and Advanced Eid Mubarak.
Thank you for having me. Good to speak to you guys. Take care.
Thank you for having us. Talal, can we just have our email addresses circulated within the group? I feel like it'll be helpful if people have more questions and they want to reach out. So probably a good idea to just have it sent out.
Thank you, guys.
You can go ahead. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.